if you're going to be with somebody for the rest of your life, you're going to have to learn how to forgive them, and you're definitely going to have to figure out a way for you to coexist peacefully. This point in the book is about the parents. So I told y'all this is the husband hour. The main character is I mean, she's no longer suffering loss. Her husband's been dead for 4 years now, but her parents are now having their own issues. One of them being, the primary issue being that the dad ends up putting the family in danger. They're losing their properties because he was trying to save their store, and he did not tell the mom about it. He didn't communicate it to her. So they're now in the process of, they went back to the other house. They haven't disclosed this information to the daughters yet, and the mom is like baking and going through all this stuff that they're going to have to get rid of, and the husband comes in, and they had a little conversation, and now I'm going to pick up where they are. He shook his head wistfully as if he were missing something obvious. Time won't help, Beth. I feel stuck, and I'm trying to find my way out of it. I can't spend one more day mired in negativity. Problems with the girls, problems with the business. It's been going on so long, it's a habit. Life doesn't have to be like this. Problems with the girls being, their oldest daughter is like, I don't know what to say about her. She's going through a divorce. She has a son. The child that she has was from a previous relationship, and she just always seems to have like relationship issues or issues with men. And then the younger daughter, she's just lonely, wanting to be isolated because, like I said, she's been a widow for 4 years, and she just wants to keep on going like that. And then now they have their own problems. So she says, of course it does. That's why it's called life. He says, no, that's our life, yours and mine together. You know, Lauren's husband died 4 years ago, but yours didn't. She says, what's that supposed to mean? Howard looked around the room like a trapped animal. Beth, we either need to reset or separate, but I'm not spending one more year like I've spent the past few. His life has been rough since the husband died because his wife, has been very overly consumed with making sure that her daughter is okay, even though her daughter just wants to be left alone. She knew she should have felt scared or upset that her husband was talking about leaving, but all she felt was a wave of anger. Then a thought exploded, a thought that maybe had been glimmering, a tiny spark, for weeks now. She asked him, did you lose the house on purpose? He said, why would I do that? She says, I don't know, to give yourself an excuse to leave. Now, this is what I think is interesting about this whole conversation. He just mentioned that he's feeling overwhelmed, and that, they either need to figure it out or they need to separate. And she admits, or like the narrator admits, that she feels upset, she feels scared, but anger overcomes her. So, and this goes back to what we talk about all the time, how like normally when we display anger and extreme frustration like that, it's not really anger, it's fear, it's embarrassment, it's something else. And so in this case, hers is feeling fear. And so instead of her coming out and saying what her true feelings are, it just comes out as anger, and she accuses him of losing the house on purpose. Now, I'm not siding with him on losing the house. That's terrible. Like, he put all of them in a pickle by putting their house up as a gamble to save the store like that, especially without telling his wife. But what I'm talking about is, if you intend to stay married, no matter what the circumstances, there's going to have to be some bending. And he's been spending like time trying to fix it. He's like, look, let's go to Florida together. We know people out there. Let's go look at some property. Let's go see what we can get for our buck. But his wife, again, she's justified in her anger and her frustration for him putting them in this situation. But if you're going to stay this man's wife, like, y'all going to have to figure it out, and you're going to have to put that behind you because it happened, and now we got to move forward, right? And so she's just been pushing back on him. Now she's exploding on him because she's angry. And I'm not, like, when I'm talking about this, I'm not saying that she doesn't have a right to be angry. Like, anybody would be angry in this situation. But what's happening is something that we talk about here all the time. You're missing the opportunity to just give in and to compromise and to be like, look, you know what, let's figure this out. But she's holding on to anger. She's holding on to how could he. She's holding on to how dare he. I can't believe that he's doing this, instead of trying to be like, you know what, Howard, let's figure this out. So he put down the sports jacket he was holding and moved closer to Beth. He took one of her hands and squeezed it. He said, I don't want an excuse to leave. I want an excuse to stay. Your children need you here this summer, she says. Your grandson. Let me rephrase that, he says. I want an excuse to stay in this marriage. So he said, I want an excuse to stay. She's thinking he's talking about stay here physically in the house with the kids and the grandson. He's saying, I need an excuse to stay in this marriage because what is going on these past few years? You've been neglecting me. Yes, we're going through a lot. You're overly consumed with our daughters and your grandson, and that's great. but like we need to focus on us too. And I think this is a common complaint. Like this is so heartbreaking because you can see exactly what it is that the wife is saying. You can see her frustration, but then you can also now more clearly see that the husband is like, ma'am, like I know we're grandparents and I know that we're parents, but our children are grown and we still have a life to live. And so it's kind of like moving into that. And plus this section doesn't go over some other stuff that happens, so it's kind of, I'm oversimplifying here. So anyway, Beth pulled her hand away. She felt like she'd been slapped. What was he referring to? Their sex life? Okay, things had dwindled the past year or so, but they weren't teenagers anymore, and the money problems didn't help, nor did their tension over the girls. Howard never agreed that with Beth about letting Lauren isolate herself at the shore, and he had also taken Stephanie's wayward personal life very hard. But none of this was Beth's fault. And see, this is what we do too. Like, and this is not just women. I think we, like people, do this where we start to think about things that aren't even relevant because he's not attacking her. He's not accusing her of anything. He's just expressing his frustration. And in him expressing his frustration, she can't hear the heart of what he's saying. He's like begging for his wife to just be there for him and stop being so consumed with everything else. Just be here for me. Like, we need to figure this out. We need to be together. Let's take this weekend. Let's go away, leave the girls and the kid, and let's go, right? But she's just like, I can't believe he's blaming me for this. This isn't my fault. And he's not. He's not blaming her for anything. He says, well, maybe I don't have one. She says, well, maybe I don't have one for you, the excuse. Howard nodded. He says that I'm going back to Florida next week to stay with Bill and Lorraine. Mind you, that's the friends that they have out there. That he wanted to go out there to look at property, just kind of survey everything, see what the prices were looking like to see if Florida might be a good place for them to go. So she's thinking, was that how it ended? 30 years, dismissed with a few words and a half-packed suitcase? That's fine with me, Howard, she says. But it wasn't fine. None of this was fine. Lauren widowed, Stephanie a single mother, her own marriage disintegrating at middle age, and yet she had no idea how to fix any of it. And again, I just want to reference the fact that there were so many, within this one exchange, there were so many instances where they could have just put their pride to the side. I feel like he did. He's just like been begging this lady for a long time. And I know that she's upset, but there were so many instances within this one conversation where she could have just been like, you know what, okay, let me just surrender. Let me just give it up. Let me stop. But she's fighting so hard to like hold on to being right when nobody is really saying anything to her about if she's wrong. He's not attacking her. He's not doing any of that. She's just assuming that that's what he's saying through his unspoken communication when really he's just begging to have his wife be supportive of him. He's just begging for his wife to pay attention to him and to not be so consumed with other things. And it's really sad because this is fiction and this is not at all a true story, but it still illustrates what happens so much in relationships, what happens so much in communication, and how things break down and how one person is talking but the other person is hearing what they want to hear. And that's how the problems just keep going. Because I'm not going to make light of the fact that this is a small problem. It's not. That's a big deal. She has every right to be upset. But this happens with other types of problems. This happens with things that are not so huge or that are not so difficult to get through. And I think that if we learned how to just listen to each other, if we learned how to just surrender sometimes and stop holding on to pride and ego, we would all just be so much better off. Anyway, that's not the entirety of this story. It's not a story about them. It's a story about their daughter. Well, it's really a story about all of them, but this is just like one little part of the story. It's very interesting, very intriguing. It'll keep you reading from start to finish. The name of the book is The Husband Hour by Jamie Brenner. I got it from the library. I'm pretty sure it's also in your library, and it's probably on Libby too.